The dust kicked up around her boots as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos walked across the forward operating base in Afghanistan. Every step sent sharp pain through her left leg, a reminder of the IED explosion that had torn through her convoy 3 months earlier. The doctors had told her she might never walk normally again, but here she was, back on active duty against all odds. The other soldiers watched her carefully. Some tried to hide their stares, but she felt their eyes following her uneven gait. She had worked tirelessly in physical therapy, pushing through agony that would have broken most people. Yet despite her determination and proven track record as one of the finest communications specialists in her unit, whispers followed her everywhere. "She's not ready," she heard Corporal Jenkins mutter to his buddy near the supply tent. "Look at how she walks. How's she supposed to keep up if we get into trouble?" Maria's jaw tightened, but she kept walking toward the communications bunker. She had been assigned to monitor enemy radio frequencies for the upcoming patrol mission. Her commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Davis, had specifically requested her for this operation. Her ability to intercept and decode enemy communications was legendary in their unit, but the recent injury had planted seeds of doubt in many minds. Inside the bunker, the familiar hum of radio equipment welcomed her. Banks of monitors displayed various frequencies, and multiple radio sets crackled with static and distant voices. This was her domain, where her disability meant nothing and her skills meant everything. She settled into her chair, adjusted her headset, and began the meticulous work of scanning enemy communications. Hours passed as she listened to fragments of conversations in Pashto and Dari, languages she had mastered during her previous deployments. Most chatter was routine, but she knew how to identify the subtle changes in tone and urgency that often preceded attacks. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, logging coordinates and code words that might seem meaningless to others, but formed patterns in her trained mind. As evening approached, the patrol team gathered for their final briefing. Captain Rodriguez outlined their mission to establish a checkpoint in a valley suspected of heavy insurgent activity. Maria would remain at base, providing real-time intelligence support through radio communication. She noticed several team members glancing at her with uncertainty, their expressions reflecting the same doubts she had heard whispered throughout the day. "Santos will be our eyes and ears out there," Captain Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying absolute confidence. "Her intelligence has saved more lives than any weapon in this unit." Despite the captain's endorsement, Maria could see the skepticism in some faces. Sergeant Williams, a veteran of multiple deployments, crossed his arms and looked away when their eyes met. The unspoken question hung in the air like smoke from the evening cooking fires outside. Could someone who struggled to walk across the base be trusted with their lives in a combat situation? That night, Maria lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling of the sleeping quarters. The constant pain in her leg had become a companion she had learned to ignore, but the doubt of her fellow soldiers cut deeper than any physical wound. She had dedicated 8 years of her life to the military, earning commendations and respect through countless missions. Yet one moment of devastating impact had seemingly erased all of that in the minds of some. She thought about her sister back home in Texas, who had begged her to accept a medical discharge and come home to a safe civilian job. "You've done enough," her sister had said during their last video call. "You don't have anything left to prove." But Maria knew she had everything to prove. Not to the world, but to herself and to every soldier who would face similar challenges in the future. Tomorrow's mission would either validate the faith that Lieutenant Colonel Davis and Captain Rodriguez had placed in her, or it would confirm the whispered doubts that followed her everywhere she walked. The pre-dawn air carried a chill that made Maria's injured leg ache more than usual as she made her way to the communications bunker. The patrol team was already preparing their vehicles, checking weapons and equipment under the harsh glare of floodlights. She could hear the low rumble of engines warming up and the metallic clicks of magazines being loaded. Inside the bunker, she began her systematic check of all communication equipment. Every radio frequency had to be crystal clear, every backup system tested and ready. The lives of 12 soldiers would depend on the clarity of these connections. She tested the encryption devices, verified satellite uplinks, and established secure channels with higher command. "Overwatch, this is Patrol 7, radio check," came Captain Rodriguez's voice through her headset. "Patrol 7, this is Overwatch, I have you 5x5. Maria responded, using the military terminology for perfect signal strength. "All systems green and ready for your departure." Through the bunker's reinforced window, she watched the convoy of 3 armored vehicles roll toward the main gate. In the lead vehicle, she could see Captain Rodriguez studying maps under a red-filtered light. Behind him, 12 soldiers sat in tactical silence, each one carrying the weight of the dangerous mission ahead. As the convoy disappeared into the darkness beyond the base perimeter, Maria settled in for what she knew would be a long day. The valley they were entering had been quiet for too long, which in Afghanistan usually meant trouble was brewing. She adjusted her headset and began scanning the enemy frequencies she had identified over the past several days. For the first 2 hours, everything proceeded according to plan. The patrol reached their designated checkpoint without incident and began establishing their position. Maria provided regular updates on enemy communication patterns, reporting that the usual chatter seemed normal and contained no immediate threats. Overwatch checkpoint established. Beginning patrol sweep of the northern ridge, Captain Rodriguez reported. Copy that, Patrol 7. I'm monitoring multiple enemy frequencies. All quiet on my end, Maria replied, her eyes never leaving the bank of monitors displaying various signal strengths and frequency patterns. But something felt wrong. In her years of monitoring enemy communications, she had developed an instinct for the subtle changes that preceded attacks. The normal background chatter on insurgent frequencies had become too quiet, too coordinated. Experienced fighters knew to reduce radio traffic before launching operations. She leaned forward, fine-tuning her receivers and switching between known enemy frequencies. Then she caught it, a brief transmission on a frequency she had been tracking for weeks. The voice spoke in quick coded phrases, but Maria's trained ear picked up the urgency and the coordinates being discussed. Her blood ran cold as she translated the coordinates in her head. They matched the exact location where Patrol 7 had established their checkpoint. The enemy wasn't just aware of their presence. They were actively coordinating an attack. Patrol 7, this is Overwatch, she called urgently into her microphone. I'm picking up increased enemy chatter. Recommend you move to alternate position immediately. Copy, Overwatch. Can you confirm immediate threat? Captain Rodriguez's voice carried the calm professionalism of an experienced officer, but Maria could hear the underlying tension. She switched to another frequency and heard confirmation of her worst fears. Multiple enemy groups were converging on the patrol's position, and they had heavy weapons. The attack would come from 3 directions simultaneously, designed to trap the patrol in a crossfire with no escape route. Patrol 7, this is immediate threat, Maria shouted into her microphone. Multiple enemy groups moving to your position from grid squares 47 Alpha, 48 Bravo, and 49 Charlie. Estimate 15 to 20 combatants with heavy weapons. You need to move now. Through her headset, she could hear the sudden burst of activity as the patrol team scrambled to respond to her warning. Engines roared to life, and she could hear Captain Rodriguez barking orders to his men. But would her warning come in time? Or had the enemy already moved into position to spring their carefully planned trap? The sound of gunfire erupted through Maria's headset like thunder in a storm. Despite her urgent warning, the patrol had not been able to escape the trap in time. The enemy had positioned themselves perfectly, using the rocky terrain to their advantage and cutting off the patrol's primary escape route. Taking heavy fire from multiple positions, Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the radio, punctuated by the distinctive crack of AK-47s and the deeper boom of rocket-propelled grenades. Request immediate air support. Maria's fingers flew across her keyboard as she simultaneously coordinated with higher command for air support while continuing to monitor enemy communications. The attackers were using multiple radio frequencies to coordinate their assault, trying to overwhelm the surrounded patrol through sheer firepower and tactical positioning. Air support is 20 minutes out, she reported back to the patrol, her heart sinking as she spoke. 20 minutes was a lifetime in a firefight, especially when outnumbered 3-1. Through the enemy radio chatter, she learned the full scope of their predicament. The insurgents had been planning this ambush for days, waiting for exactly this type of patrol. They had positioned machine gun nests on the high ground and planted improvised explosive devices along the most likely escape routes. Overwatch. We're pinned down hard, came Sergeant Williams's voice, the same soldier who had questioned her capabilities just hours earlier. They've got us in a crossfire and Rodriguez is hit. Maria's blood turned to ice. Captain Rodriguez was not just the patrol leader. He was one of the few officers who had never doubted her abilities. Now he was wounded, possibly dying while trapped in an ambush she should have detected sooner. She forced herself to focus, pushing aside the guilt and fear that threatened to overwhelm her. This was exactly the moment that defined whether she belonged in combat operations or should accept that medical discharge her sister had urged her to take. Switching between enemy frequencies, she began to map out their positions based on their radio communications. Each transmission gave her clues about their locations, their weapons, and most importantly, their plans. The enemy commander was coordinating the attack from a position on the eastern ridge, using coded references to direct his fighters. Patrol 7, I'm tracking enemy commander on eastern ridge. Approximately 300 meters from your position, she transmitted. He's directing the entire operation from grid square 48 Delta. Copy that, Overwatch, came a new voice. Sergeant Williams had taken command with Captain Rodriguez down, but we can't get a clear shot from our position. They've got us completely surrounded. Maria continued monitoring the enemy frequencies, and gradually a pattern emerged. The insurgent commander was growing frustrated with his fighters' inability to finish off the trapped patrol. He was ordering them to move closer, to take more risks to end the fight quickly before American air support arrived. That's when she heard it. A transmission that made her heart race with both terror and opportunity. The enemy commander was planning to lead a final assault personally, moving from his protected position on the ridge to coordinate the attack from closer range. He would be exposed during the movement, but only for a brief window. Patrol 7, enemy commander, is moving to new position in approximately 2 minutes, she reported. He'll be exposed crossing the open ground between grid squares 48 Delta and 47 Charlie. This might be your only shot. We can't see that area from here, Williams replied, frustration clear in his voice. Too much rock cover blocking our view. Maria stared at her monitors, her mind racing through possibilities. She had been tracking the enemy commander's voice pattern for weeks, learning to recognize his cadence and speech patterns. She knew his radio call signs and understood his tactical preferences from previous operations. Then an idea struck her. Dangerous and unprecedented, but possibly their only chance. She had never attempted anything like it before, but her deep understanding of enemy communication protocols might give her the edge they needed. She took a deep breath, switched to the enemy frequency, and began preparing to do something that could either save the patrol or get them all killed. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the microphone, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether her fellow soldiers lived or died. Maria's heart pounded as she switched her radio to the enemy frequency she had been monitoring for weeks. Speaking in fluent Pashto with the regional accent she had perfected during her previous deployments, she keyed her microphone and spoke words that could either save her trapped comrades or seal their fate. Command, this is Eagle 2, she said, using the call sign she had heard repeatedly from one of the insurgent fighters. American reinforcements approaching from the south. Large convoy with heavy weapons. We need to withdraw immediately. The enemy frequency exploded with confused chatter. Maria had perfectly mimicked the voice pattern and speech cadence of one of the fighters. But more importantly, she had introduced exactly the kind of chaos that could break their coordinated attack. Through her other radio, she could hear the gunfire from the patrol's position beginning to slack off slightly. The enemy fighters were questioning each other, trying to verify the false report of approaching reinforcements. Some were demanding confirmation, while others were already expressing doubt about continuing the attack. Overwatch, whatever you just did, it's working, came Sergeant Williams's voice through her headset. Enemy fire is decreasing. They seemed confused about something, but Maria's gambit was far from over. She switched to another enemy frequency, this time impersonating a different fighter with a higher-pitched voice and more nervous demeanor. I can see the dust cloud from the American convoy, she transmitted in Pashto. At least 8 vehicles, maybe more. They'll be here in 10 minutes. The enemy commander's voice cut through the chatter, demanding order and trying to regain control of his fighters. But Maria had planted seeds of doubt and fear that were spreading through their ranks like wildfire. She had studied insurgent psychology extensively, and she knew that their greatest weakness was their tendency to fragment under pressure. Continuing her deception, she transmitted again on a third frequency, this time mimicking the panicked voice of a lookout she had heard in previous intercepts. Command, command. I can see helicopter gunships circling to the west. They know our positions. We need to leave now. This final transmission pushed the enemy over the edge. Maria could hear the fear and uncertainty in their voices as discipline began to break down. Some fighters were demanding immediate withdrawal, while others were questioning the authenticity of the reports. The carefully coordinated attack was dissolving into chaos and mutual suspicion. Patrol 7. Enemy forces appear to be withdrawing from positions on the northern and eastern ridges, she reported to the trapped soldiers. This is your window. Move to the southern rally point now. Through her headset, she could hear the roar of engines as the patrol's vehicles started up. Sergeant Williams was coordinating the movement with the calm professionalism of a seasoned combat veteran, but she could detect the urgency in his voice. Moving to rally point now, Williams reported. How much time do we have before they figure out what happened? That was the question Maria had been dreading. Her deception had worked for now, but experienced fighters would eventually realize they had been tricked. The enemy commander was already trying to restore order, demanding visual confirmation of the reported American reinforcements. Unknown, she replied honestly. Get to that rally point as fast as possible. The longer this takes, the more likely they'll realize what happened. As the patrol fought their way toward the southern rally point, Maria continued monitoring enemy communications. She could hear the growing suspicion in the insurgent commander's voice as he questioned his fighters about the reported reinforcements. Some of his more experienced men were beginning to express doubt about the authenticity of the reports. There are no helicopters, one veteran fighter reported. I have clear view of the western approaches. No aircraft anywhere. And I see no dust from any convoy approaching from the south, added another voice. Maria's deception was unraveling, but it had bought the patrol precious time. Through her headset, she could hear them making progress toward the rally point, but they were still in danger. If the enemy realized they had been tricked before the patrol reached safety, they would pursue with renewed fury and determination. The enemy commander's voice came through her monitors, cold and deadly with understanding. We have been deceived, he said in Pashto. Find those Americans. Kill them all. Patrol 7, they know, Maria transmitted urgently. Enemy is regrouping and preparing to pursue. You need to reach that rally point immediately. The chase that followed was unlike anything Maria had ever experienced from her position in the communications bunker. Through her headset, she could hear the roar of engines, the crack of gunfire, and the sharp commands of Sergeant Williams as he led the patrol through treacherous mountain terrain toward the rally point. Overwatch. We've got multiple vehicles pursuing us, Williams reported, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding him. Can you track their movements? Maria's fingers danced across her equipment as she monitored multiple enemy frequencies simultaneously. The insurgent commander had reorganized quickly after discovering her deception, and now he was coordinating a pursuit with cold, methodical precision. His forces were using their knowledge of the local terrain to try to cut off the patrol's escape routes. Patrol 7. Enemy forces are splitting into 3 groups, she reported, after analyzing the radio traffic. One group following your direct route, another moving to block the bridge at Checkpoint Alpha, and a third trying to flank you from the eastern slope. The strategic situation was deteriorating rapidly. The enemy knew these mountains better than any American force, and they were using that advantage to maximum effect. Maria could hear the frustration and growing desperation in the patrol's communications as they encountered one blocked route after another. Bridge. At Checkpoint Alpha is compromised, came Williams' voice. Enemy positions dug in with heavy weapons. We need an alternate route. Maria studied her maps frantically, cross-referencing them with the terrain intelligence she had gathered over months of monitoring enemy communications. There was another route, but it was dangerous and would take them through territory that intelligence reports marked as heavily mined. Patrol 7. There's a secondary route through the Western Valley, but intel reports indicate possible IED threat, she transmitted. It's your choice, but it might be your only option. The seconds ticked by as Williams considered the options. Behind them, the pursuing enemy forces were closing the gap, and ahead of them lay a route that could destroy their vehicles with buried explosives. It was a choice between certain combat and probable death. We're taking the western route, Williams decided. Guide us through, Overwatch. We're counting on you. The weight of responsibility settled on Maria's shoulders like a physical burden. 12 lives now depended entirely on her ability to navigate them through a minefield, using nothing but intelligence reports and intercepted communications. Her injured leg throbbed with pain as stress and adrenaline surged through her system. As the patrol entered the Western Valley, Maria monitored enemy frequencies for any indication of IED locations. The insurgents often used radio-controlled detonators, which meant they had to communicate about timing and positioning. She listened intently for code words, coordinate references, or any other clues that might reveal hidden dangers. "Slow down at grid reference 45 Bravo," she instructed after catching a fragment of conversation about packages left in that area. Possible IED threat. "Proceed with extreme caution." The patrol's progress slowed to a crawl as they carefully navigated the suspected danger zones. Meanwhile, their pursuers were gaining ground, and Maria could hear the enemy commander coordinating an attempt to trap them in the valley. "They're moving fighters to block the southern exit," she warned. "If you don't reach the valley mouth in the next 10 minutes, you'll be trapped." The tension in Williams's voice was evident when he responded. "We're moving as fast as we can, but we can't risk hitting an IED. How much time do we really have?" Maria listened to the enemy communications, calculating distances and movement times in her head. The mathematics of survival came down to simple equations of speed versus safety, and the numbers were not encouraging. 8 minutes, maybe less, she replied honestly. The blocking force is moving faster than anticipated. It was then that she heard something that made her blood run cold. The enemy commander was no longer just coordinating the pursuit. He was personally leading the blocking force. His voice carried the authority and tactical sophistication of someone who had survived multiple encounters with American forces. More alarming was what she heard in the background of his transmissions. The distinctive sound of a heavy machine gun being mounted and prepared for use. They weren't just planning to block the patrol's escape. They were preparing to destroy them completely in the narrow confines of the valley mouth. "Patrol 7, enemy is setting up heavy weapons at the valley exit," she transmitted urgently. "You're heading into a killing zone. They've got you perfectly positioned for an ambush." The patrol stopped, engines idling as Williams processed this devastating news. Behind them came the sounds of the pursuing force, and ahead lay an enemy machine gun position, waiting to cut them down. They were trapped in exactly the kind of tactical nightmare that ended careers and lives. "Options, Overwatch?" Williams asked, his voice carrying the weight of command and the knowledge that his next decision would determine whether his men lived or died. Maria stared at her monitors, her mind racing through every piece of intelligence she had gathered, every enemy transmission she had intercepted, and every tactical manual she had ever studied. There had to be something, some advantage they could exploit or weakness they could target. Then she heard it, almost lost in the static and background noise of enemy communications. A brief transmission that most analysts would have dismissed as routine chatter, but which Maria recognized as something far more significant. The transmission Maria caught was brief and seemingly insignificant, but her trained ear picked up something crucial. The enemy commander had mentioned the old watchtower position when directing his machine gun team to set up their ambush. She remembered that reference from intelligence briefings months earlier about abandoned Soviet-era observation posts. Throughout the region, her fingers flew across her keyboard as she pulled up detailed topographical maps and historical intelligence files. The old watchtower the commander referenced was indeed at the valley mouth, but it had a critical weakness that the enemy might not remember. Soviet engineers had built a service tunnel beneath the position to allow supply runs during winter months when the main road was impassable. "Patrol 7, I need you to stop at grid reference 46 Alpha and look for a concrete culvert on the eastern side of the road," she transmitted urgently. "There should be a drainage tunnel that runs parallel to your route." "Overwatch, we don't have time for sightseeing," Williams replied tersely. "Enemy forces are closing from behind, and you just told us there's a machine gun nest waiting ahead." "That tunnel bypasses the ambush position," Maria explained quickly. "It's an old Soviet supply route that connects to high ground above the enemy position. If you can get through it, you'll have the tactical advantage." She could hear Williams discussing the option with his men, weighing the risks of exploring an unknown tunnel system against the certainty of destruction if they continued on their current path. The sounds of pursuing vehicles were getting closer, and time was running out for any decision. "Found the culvert," came Corporal Martinez's voice, "but it's narrow and we don't know if our vehicles can fit through." "Leave the vehicles," Williams decided. "We'll proceed on foot through the tunnel. Overwatch, how long is this passage?" Maria consulted her maps and historical records. Approximately 400 meters. It should emerge on the ridge above the watchtower position. But you need to move fast because the pursuing force will reach your abandoned vehicles in less than 5 minutes. The next few minutes were tense as Maria monitored both the patrol's progress through the tunnel and the enemy communications. The insurgent commander was growing suspicious about the sudden silence from his prey, and he was ordering scouts to investigate. "They found your vehicles," she reported as enemy voices confirmed the discovery. "The commander is sending half his force into the tunnel after you. The other half is maintaining the ambush position." "How much further to the exit?" Williams asked, his voice echoing strangely through the underground passage. "You should be approaching it now," Maria replied, then added, "But there's something else. I'm picking up radio chatter about a spotter position near the tunnel exit. One enemy fighter with eyes on the area." The situation was becoming impossibly complex. The patrol was trapped underground with enemies pursuing from behind, while ahead lay a single enemy spotter who could alert the entire ambush force to their position. It would come down to split-second timing and perfect coordination. "I can see light ahead," reported Sergeant Thompson, one of Williams' most experienced men. "Tunnel exit is about 50 meters. Maria listened intently to enemy communications, tracking the location of the spotter through his radio reports to the machine gun position. He was positioned on a rocky outcrop about 30 meters from the tunnel exit, with a clear view of the surrounding area. "Patrol 7, enemy spotter is located on rocky outcrop bearing 045 degrees from tunnel exit," she transmitted. "He's reporting to the machine gun team every 30 seconds. His next report is due in 15 seconds. Can we take him silently?" Williams asked. Maria continued monitoring the spotter's communications pattern. "Negative. If he misses his next scheduled report, the entire ambush force will know something is wrong. You need a different approach." The pursuing enemy force was getting closer to the tunnel entrance, and Maria could hear their voices echoing through her radio as they prepared to follow the patrol underground. In minutes, the Americans would be caught in a deadly crossfire with nowhere to retreat. That's when inspiration struck. Maria had been monitoring enemy communications for so long that she understood not just their tactical patterns, but their psychological weaknesses. The spotter was young and inexperienced, evident from his nervous voice and frequent requests for confirmation from his commander. "Patrol 7, hold position at tunnel exit. I'm going to try something," she transmitted. Switching to the enemy frequency, Maria began broadcasting in Pashto using the voice pattern she had perfected earlier. But this time, instead of impersonating a fighter, she spoke with the authority of a senior commander issuing urgent orders. All units. American helicopter gunships inbound from the north. Immediate withdrawal to fallback positions. Acknowledge receipt." The response was immediate and exactly what she had hoped for. The young spotter, conditioned to obey senior commands without question, immediately responded with confirmation and began moving away from his position toward the designated fallback area. "Spotter is moving away from exit point," she reported to the patrol. "You have a clear path to the high ground." But even as the patrol emerged from the tunnel and began moving toward the advantageous position above the machine gun nest, Maria knew that her deception would only work for a few minutes. The enemy commander would soon realize that no helicopter attack was coming, and his fury at being deceived twice would make him even more dangerous. The final phase of the operation unfolded with the precision of a perfectly executed military maneuver. From her position in the communications bunker, Maria coordinated the patrol's assault on the enemy machine gun position with real-time intelligence that proved devastating to the insurgent forces. "Patrol 7 in position on high ground," Williams reported. "We have visual on enemy machine gun nest. 3 fighters visible. Heavy weapon positioned to cover valley approach." Maria continued monitoring enemy communications as the confused insurgent commander tried to re-establish contact with his scattered forces. Her multiple deceptions had shattered their coordination and left them vulnerable to exactly the kind of tactical surprise the patrol now possessed. "Enemy commander is attempting to recall his forces," she reported. "He's realized the helicopter threat was false, but his fighters are scattered and confused. You have maximum tactical advantage for the next 60 seconds. What followed was swift and decisive. The patrol's assault from the high ground caught the machine gun team completely off guard. Years of training and combat experience came together in a coordinated attack that neutralized the enemy position before they could effectively respond. "Enemy position neutralized," Williams reported, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and professional satisfaction. 3 enemy KIA heavy weapons secured, but the victory came with a sobering reminder of the cost of combat. As the patrol prepared to move to the extraction point, Williams provided a casualty report that brought the reality of war into sharp focus. "Captain Rodriguez is stable, but needs immediate medical attention," he reported. "Shrapnel wounds to the leg and shoulder. Corporal Martinez has minor injuries from tunnel debris." Maria coordinated the medical evacuation helicopter while simultaneously tracking the movements of the remaining enemy forces. The insurgent commander, enraged by his tactical defeat and the loss of his machine gun position, was attempting to organize one final attack on the extraction point. "Patrol 7, enemy commander is rallying remaining forces for assault on your extraction zone," she warned. "Estimate 8 to 10 fighters moving to intercept medical helicopter." The next 20 minutes tested every skill Maria had developed during her military career. She tracked enemy movements through their radio communications, coordinated with the incoming medical helicopter, and provided tactical guidance to the patrol as they defended their position. "Medical bird is 2 minutes out," she reported. "Enemy forces are approaching from the northwest, but they're moving in the open. You should have clear shots." The sound of renewed gunfire came through her headset as the patrol engaged the final enemy assault. But this time, the tactical situation favored the Americans completely. Maria's intelligence had given them perfect positioning, and the enemy's desperate attack lacked the coordination and surprise that had made their original ambush so dangerous. "Enemy commander is down," came Thompson's voice through the radio. "Remaining fighters are withdrawing. Area is secure for extraction." As the medical helicopter landed and began loading the wounded, Maria finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion that had been building throughout the day. Her injured leg throbbed painfully, and her hands shook slightly from the sustained stress of coordinating the complex operation. "Overwatch, this is Patrol 7, came Williams' voice one final time before extraction. "Mission complete. All personnel accounted for. Rodriguez and Martinez are stable and being evacuated." Then, after a brief pause, Williams added something that would stay with Maria for the rest of her career. "Overwatch, I owe you an apology. We all do. Your actions today saved every one of our lives. You proved that courage isn't about how you walk. It's about how you stand when others need you most." 3 weeks later, Maria stood in the base commander's office receiving a commendation for her actions during the operation. Lieutenant Colonel Davis read the citation aloud, detailing how her innovative use of enemy communications deception had saved the lives of 12 soldiers and resulted in the elimination of a significant insurgent threat. But the real validation came from her fellow soldiers. The whispers and sideways glances had been replaced by nods of respect and requests for tactical advice. Corporal Jenkins, who had questioned her readiness just weeks before, approached her after the ceremony. "Sergeant Santos," he said, standing at attention, "I wanted to apologize for what I said before the mission. I was wrong about what makes a soldier ready for combat." Maria looked at him with understanding rather than resentment. "We all judge people by what we can see on the surface, Jenkins. The real test comes when everything depends on what's inside." That evening, she called her sister in Texas for their weekly video chat. When her sister asked about the commendation ceremony, Maria simply said, "I think I finally proved what I needed to prove to myself." Her sister smiled through the computer screen. "I never doubted you for a second, but I'm glad you found your own proof." As Maria settled into her bunk that night, the constant pain in her leg seemed less important than it had in months. She had discovered that strength wasn't measured by physical perfection, but by the determination to serve others regardless of personal limitations. The radio equipment hummed quietly in the communications bunker across the base, ready for the next mission and the next opportunity to prove that heroism comes in many forms. Maria Santos had walked with difficulty into a war zone, but she had spoken with the clear, strong voice of someone who would never be underestimated again. Her final radio transmission of the day had been simple and direct. "Enemy neutralized." But those 2 words represented so much more than a tactical report. They represented the moment when doubt was neutralized by courage, When physical limitations were overcome by mental strength, and when a soldier proved that the most powerful weapon in any arsenal is the determination to protect those who depend on you.